They have other problems. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I was just jet lagged and just still getting over something. So yes, I was in Nigeria for a week. I learned more in 7 days professionally and personally, I suppose, but professionally than I have in the entire previous year at SNC. SNC does a lot of things, of course, as a large engineering company. But one of the roles that we sometimes get employed to do is something called within the industry. There's different terms. One of the terms is called an independent engineer. So you get hired by basically a company that's a utility or owner of some kind of construction project who's hired a contractor to build a project. They have their own engineer on staff or own engineering company to kind of engineer it. And then during the process of construction, they have someone independent coming, usually employed by the finance people, to audit it and tell the owner and the financiers how things are going. So in this particular case, there's a small project there that's about 150 megawatt power plant, which is the first IPP, meaning independent power producer in, well, maybe the second one in Nigeria, because previously it was government-owned utilities. So it's a small company, and they've had this project on the go for a while. If the financial crisis had not hit a year and a half ago or so, they would have been completed by now and operating. But the financing dried up at that time, and the project got about 50 or 60% complete. And so now it's basically a half-constructed power plant sitting in the Nigerian jungle.
Wow.
And nobody's happy about that.
Where is it?
It's in a city called Aba. We're just on the outskirts of Aba, which is near, about 60 kilometers from Port Harcourt, which is right in the Delta region. So we started our trip in Lagos, which is the largest city, the former capital, no longer the capital, and I think there's 11 million people there. That's the population. And so we met with the bankers, we met with the owners, and a joint meeting to discuss kind of what our mandate was. And then the next day, just coincidentally, my colleague, who's a little bit more on the business side than I am, business side of SNC, had arranged to go to a privatization meeting that the government had sponsored. So the government of Nigeria is basically looking to privatize its utility, or its electricity sector, basically.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot
they looking at public-private partnerships?
Really, possibly, but mostly private. They want to sell it all off, basically. So right now, the country, with a population of 150 million or something like that, has an installed theoretical capacity of 9,000 megawatts. I'll tell you what that means in a second. So 9,000 megawatts, of which 4,000 is actually operational because of maintenance and stuff just sitting idle. It's all at the end of its useful life anyway. So it's basically a big disaster. So I think the installed capacity of Saskatchewan is about 6,000 megawatts. So with a population of 1 million, Saskatchewan has 6,000 megawatts. So for a population of 150 million, they have 4,000 operational. You can imagine what that means, right? So electricity is at a premium there, and everywhere you go, if you're even in the fanciest hotel, every hour, you get a little blackout or something.
I was going to say, yeah.
So it's constantly happening. So the Nigerian government has gone on a roadshow. Their opening roadshow or meeting was in Lagos, where there were probably about 200 people, bankers, investors, and people wanted to get involved in this. Potentially buying properties, and the properties are pretty worthless, but basically what you're buying is a license to generate. So they
a license to
generate. Yeah, okay.
The IPP, just to interrupt, is to convert diesel oil into electricity.
Sorry, the what?
To convert oil into electricity?
Well, they have oil, but they have natural gas too. So most of the fuel is natural gas.
Okay,
for
converting natural gas into electricity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, just to finish on this subject of the privatization, the government said their goal at this meeting was to go from 4,000 megawatts per day to 40,000 in 10 years, which is about the capacity of Quebec, basically, in 10 years. I think that's totally impossible, but that's their goal. So they went on a roadshow subsequently to New York City, to London, and to a few other financial centers to see if they could draw up business. I don't know that I don't think they were in the East so much. They went to the Middle East. I don't think they went to Asia. But anyway, they have a website. If you're interested, I could tell you what the website is if you're interested to find out what they're up to. But anyway, so that was that.
What is the website?
You know what? I'll send you an email with the website. I think it's Nigeria.electricityprivatization.com, something like that. I'll send it, yeah. So then our real job, so we weren't there for that, but so I just wanted to answer your question about investment. So there's a huge investment opportunities in Nigeria. Whether you want to invest there is another question. High risk, but anyway. So then we went to this audit this construction project, and in that part of the country, you need to travel with basically armed guards and escorts and stuff. So we were traveling around in a convoy with armed guards, and we got to the site with armed guards, and so we basically did our audit over a day basically, and then we flew to Abuja, which is the capital city, and we had more meetings there. And so it was just a fascinating place.
And how were you looked after in terms of accommodations?
Oh, first class. We were in all good hotels everywhere, and when we were on the site, there was like reasonably nice residences and stuff. So.
And the IQ of your hosts?
Very good, very high. The IQ, like the company that we were basically employed by the bankers, which were really Nigerian banks, but. The power company itself is really one of the first companies that's trying to do this, and they're inexperienced, but it's not really their fault that this happened. Kind of a little bit, not really. They're very competent. I think they'll pull it off. I think they still have a lot of challenges, but I think our recommendation is that they give them the money and they finish the job. So,
Stephen, what was the average age of the people you were talking to?
I would say 30s, 40s, 50s. Yeah, 30s, 40s, 50s. Yeah. And so it was really a fascinating trip. There is one thing I learned, and this is an environmental thing. So I'll bring it up for all of our environmental people who are interested in environmental things. I mean, I knew this anyway, but now I've really seen it and kind of felt it and tasted it. I think the company is going to make this work, but the engines, the gas turbines that are at this power plant are pretty sophisticated machines. They're called LM6000 PDs, and they're made by General Electric. And what they are is they use what's called dry low emissions technology. And so what they do is they burn natural gas, and they generate electricity. It's basically a jet engine that's connected to an electrical generator. But they're very, very efficient in terms of the way they use the fuel and the emissions. In terms of NOx, which is NOx, which is like one of the acid rain producing emissions products, and CO, carbon monoxide, are very low. So it's a very, very good machine designed for North American standards. So all new machines that come into North America today have to meet these what they call DLE standards. So, but in Africa, I got to say, there's huge challenges. I mean, the gas quality is poor. The people's the education is generally lower. The operators are going to be less educated, etc. So there are other products that GE makes. One of them is called the LM6000 PC, which is the same engine except that it uses a different technology. It's more robust, but it has higher emissions. But the truth is that most of the generation or a lot of the generation is in the local areas by diesel engines anyway. And diesel engines burn diesel fuel, and their emissions are probably about 10 times higher than a gas turbine and natural gas anyway. So what happened was the World Bank and the International Finance Corporation force developing nations, if they're going to give them money and support them as an investor, they force them to use Western standards, which means these very sophisticated machines. So it's basically like if you get money from these, the World Bank, whatever, you're effectively you're forced as a third developing nation. You're forced to buy basically a Maserati or a Lamborghini or whatever. That's what you're forced to buy.
Not only are you forced to buy an Italian sports car, but you don't get any money for maintenance.
Well, that's the issue. That's the issue because that's the issue. You're getting these sophisticated machines, but they cost that much more. They have more problems, whatever else, right? So, in this particular case, the company was forced into these sophisticated machines because they were going to get some money from the World Bank. In the end, they didn't. So they didn't have to have these overly sophisticated machines, but the decision was made and they're specified and bought, whatever. So they have these sophisticated machines more, and they don't really need them. But that's a bad thing.
Yes,
that's a bad thing.
If Stephen's finished, I can tell you my African story, which is exactly along the same lines. I worked in Zimbabwe as a CEDA project director, and there were other projects. These were at the university itself, University of Zimbabwe, and the Germans were in there, and they would deliver some equipment, typically with a Mercedes van to drive the crew around. And as soon as something broke on the Mercedes, as you said, there was no spare parts, there was no maintenance, and it fell apart. The project that I did, I delivered computers, about 200, but it was a 5-year program, and during that 5 years, I had somebody who was on the McGill payroll, but working in Zimbabwe, and they were there every business day to help them with their problems. So they got ongoing support for 5 years, 2 different labs, different projects, and in fact, one of the guys who worked with the Germans, he was the chairman of civil engineering, he said the project with the McGill and the CEDA one was the best project he'd ever seen because of the ongoing support. Now, what happened after the 5 years when our project finished, I don't know to this day. But all I can tell you is the ongoing support and the maintenance is a critical part of any development project.
Totally. Yeah. And
Absolutely.
the motivation for the World Bank, partly, not to have maintenance. The number of water treatment plants that I've seen go up when I was at the bank, that no support or maintenance. We build it and then we pack our bags and we leave. Or the engineering firm packs their bags and leaves. It's all for these public-private partnerships. If the World Bank money came along with maintenance, then there would be much less of an incentive for the government to contract out with a private company, a European or a North American private company, for the operation and maintenance of the plant for the lifetime of the plant. So there is, which is what these European engineering firms, for example, or North American, like SNC-Lavalin or
Siemens.
Yeah, all of those. This is what they want, and so there is pushback from them to actually not have these maintenance contracts, because then the governments, knowing they're not going to be maintenance money from the World Bank, that they need maintenance, are entering in these public-private partnerships, whereby they have one of these European companies come and run it for free in exchange for being able to charge people for the water, for the electricity, inflated rates, and all that. So it's a whole sort of global corporate money passing game. It's, yeah.
And the Western standards on the equipment are to knock out competition from countries like Korea.
Exactly.
The other developed, sort of the
Yeah.
developed countries, obviously. But what's the lifespan of a plant?
It's typically 25 years.
And is it in the Delta?
It's close to it.
And are they anticipating environmental change to the site that could affect the stability?
Oh, I don't think they don't think about stuff like that. No.
So that's the real problem, especially when you get to transmission, and because your cables, your distribution is only as good as its weakest link, right? And if you're going over increasingly unstable areas, then you're going to have problems.
Maybe, yeah.
Okay.
There's so much that hasn't been thought through in the last project.
Yeah.
Will you stand for questions on Nigeria?
Sure, yeah.
Do you have one?
Do you have a question?
Do you have any investments in Nigeria?
No. Well, indirectly.
Oil.
Yeah, oil. Shell obviously is there.
So you're big on oil. Has Cairo had anything to do with the oil?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Egyptian economy, the stock market is predominantly oil companies.
What about the Suez Canal?
Yeah, that's a critical link.
They're controlling that.
Yeah.
Who's controlling that? My brother or the boss or the mass?
Yeah, I don't know.
Military. Military, which is why this is actually decided to a large degree outside of Egypt. I mean, they're getting close to $2 billion from the U.S., and that's going to pay the military. So
But isn't the military in some way almost a
The
stabilizing
U.S.
force?
is supporting the military.
Yes.
yeah, the Egyptian will have been for a very,
I mean,
very long
they've
time.
been
There's one
friends
thing that
with
stands
Mubarak
after
for
all
30
this over
years.
in Egypt is going to be the Suez Canal.
Yeah,
They're planning it. That's
If it's closed,
done.
Outsiders are going to make sure it's opened.
Yes.
I can see the British Navy in there and the American, what you go with.
I got a question on Nigeria for you.
Yeah,
China.
yeah.
When I went to Kenya, I was shocked that every single infrastructure project was run by a Chinese company. Did you see much of that at all?
No, we didn't really. We saw a few Asian people around, but not so many really. Surprisingly not. No, and at the investment forum, there were a couple of Indians, but it was mostly.
Nigeria is where the U.S. is depending on getting its gas from 25 to 40% by 2015. They say it's going to come out of Africa.
Really? Okay.
Cleo, you touched on a few words that to me that you know a lot about what's going on in Egypt.
In Egypt, I mean, it's very disconcerting, and it's a big question of who's going to come in next. And the Muslim Brotherhood are not a bunch of cuddly people. You know, I have a lot of all of my Christian Egyptian friends have left the country in the last week.
Coptic.
Yeah, all the Copts I know.
So there's a lot of religion in this game.
There's the potential for it, and
It's only 1% or something of the population. So
but it's an indication of what they think the mood is with the new regime coming in. They don't feel, and there were attacks on Copts in the last year, an increasing number of attacks on Copts in the last year, which is, I think, an indication of that group getting more confident.
How do you react to the mob?
Well, I don't know what this mob is, and I don't know how much of this mob will melt away when the harder elements start coming to the top. You know, they broke militants, bad guys out of prison, and they're operational now. Mm-hmm. And the thing about, I mean, there are a bunch of different USs. There's U.S. money, there's U.S. administration, and there's Obama as a person. And each of those three have a different sort of profile or influence in Egypt. What I'm concerned about is, you know, in the Muslim world, and you're talking about how the Arab street views the U.S. A lot of the Arab street thinks Obama is Muslim, and this can be seen as a Muslim in the White House giving his okay to get rid of these American-backed dictators to let the Muslim Brotherhood come up, or to let Muslim, you know. So I think he played it really badly because he put himself forward on it, and he may want to be loved in the Muslim world, but this is really a dangerous game to play. So if he backs down, or if he's perceived to be backing or giving. And this is essentially the mistake that happened with the first Gulf War, where the message to Saddam was not clearly delivered. And he thought he had the okay to invade Kuwait. He thought the Americans had, and that's all, and the actual conversation is as in the WikiLeaks documents now, it was badly managed. And if elements within the Muslim world think this isn't okay to start knocking over these previously American-backed regimes, this is a big problem.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm pretty concerned about that. And I mean, there's talk about. I mean, already the Muslim Brotherhood is making statements like we're going to cut off gas supplies to Israel, and, you know, things like that. I mean, they're making political statements.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the
policy? They're the pundits that they're getting on air now are downplaying who they are, but they're actually some of the original Islamic extremists back in the 40s and 50s.
Oh, okay.
And they're hardcore, they're hardwired into Egypt, they're a very nasty group of people.
So
You spent a lot of time traveling. Where were you last week?
I was in Ottawa last week. Lucky me.
There's a hardcore.
No,
It was horrible, actually.
well, you're wonderful and you're amazing because you are moving around, writing stories and writing books. You're in many parts of the world, but you come up with really inside information that's really quite valuable. Where do you get it?
I was in Ottawa. So.
Can we ask what she was doing in Ottawa?
Well, let's find out. Yes, of course you can, but
It was a CSIS meeting on food security. So it was some of these issues
So
were addressed.
you're not allowed to tell
Okay.
us about what you were doing.
There'll be a public